eyes which, without a glance at the fingers of the keys, were fixed on the vaulted roof as though seeking inspiration there. The chaplain, turning to the congregation, then said: "My friends, we will all join in singing 'O Salutaris.'" The harmonium gave the first notes, and I braced myself to endure the dreadful discords I expected from the crowd of soldiers, mostly reservists, who, I supposed, had come together that evening mainly out of curiosity. Judge of my astonishment. At first only a few timid voices joined the chaplain's, but after a minute or so a marvel happened. From all those chests came a volume of sound which I could hardly have believed possible. Who will say then that our dear France had lost her faith? Who can believe it? Every one of these men joined in singing the hymn, and not one of them seemed ignorant of the Latin words. It was a magnificent choir, under a lofty vault, chanting with the fervour of absolute sincerity. There was not one discordant note, not one voice out of tune, to spoil its perfect harmony. Who can believe that men, many of them more than 30 years old, would remember all the words unless they had been brought up in the faith of their ancestors and still held it? I could not help turning to look at them. In the light of the candles their faces appeared to be wonderfully transfigured. Not one of them expressed irony or even indifference. What a fine picture it would have made for a Rembrandt! The bodies of the men were invisible in the darkness of the nave, and their heads alone emerged from the gloom. The effect was grand enough to fascinate the most sceptical of painters. It soothed and charmed one, and wiped out all the miseries that the war had left in its wake. Men like these would be equal to anything, ready for anything, and I myself should have liked to see a Monsieur Hamas hidden away in some corner of that church. Meanwhile the sacred office was proceeding at the altar. At any other time we might have smiled at the sight of that soldier priest served by choristers of 35 in uniform. At that ceremony it was inexpressibly touching and attractive, and it was especially delightful to see how carefully and precisely each performed his function, that the ceremony might not lack its accustomed pomp. When the singing had ceased, the chaplain went up to the holy table. In a voice full of feeling he tried to express his gratitude and happiness to all those brave fellows. I should not imagine him to be a brilliant speaker at the best of times, but on that occasion the worthy man was completely unintelligible. His happiness was choking him. He tried in vain to find the words he wanted, used the wrong ones, and only confused himself by trying to get them right. But nobody had the least desire to laugh when, to conclude his address, he said with a sigh of relief: "And now we will tell 20 beads of the Rosary, 10 for the success of our arms, and the other 10 in memory of the soldiers who have died on the field of honour. Hail, Mary, full of grace." I looked round the church once more, and everyone's lips were moving, silently accompanying the priest's words. Opposite us I saw the artillery captain take a rosary out of his pocket and tell the beads with dreamy eyes, and when the chaplain came to the sentence, "Holy Mary, Mother of God," hundreds of voices burst forth, deep and manly voices, full of fervour, which seemed to proclaim their faith in Him who was present before them on the altar, and also to promise self-sacrifice and devotion to that other sacred thing, their country. Then, after the Tantum Ergo had been sung with vigour, the priest held up the monstrance, and I saw all those soldiers with one accord kneel down on the stone floor and bow their heads. The silence was impressive. Not a word, not a cough, and not a chair moved. I had never seen such devotion in any church. Some spiritual power was brooding over the assemblage and bowing all those heads in token of submission and hope. Good, brave soldiers of France, how we love and honour you at such moments, and what confidence your chiefs must feel when they lead such men to battle. We sat at table around the lamp, and good Maman Cheveret had just brought in the steaming soup. Right away towards the east we heard the dull roll of the cannon. Good Monsieur Cheveret had just brought up from his cellar a venerable bottle of his best Burgundy, and, at the invitation of the Captain, he sat down to drink a glass with us, smoking his cherry-wood pipe and listening with delight to our merry chat. Gosset was in his kitchen next door preparing a delicious piece of beef à la mode, and at the same time telling the admiring Maman Cheveret about his exploits of the past month. we heard the men in the first troop cracking their jokes in the yard as they ate their rations and emptied their pannikin of wine under a brilliant moon. Down in the valley on the banks of the murmuring Vesle, songs and laughter floated up to us from the artillery park. And the village itself, shining under the star-lit sky, seemed bathed in an atmosphere of cheerfulness, courage and confidence. End of chapter 5. Recording by FNH. Visit www.bookranger.co.uk